The boardroom glittered like a stage built for kings. But the moment Michael stepped inside, he felt like an intruder trespassing on private land. The city skyline stretched behind the glass walls, a shimmering reminder of how far he'd climbed and how far they still believed he didn't belong. 12 executives in their Navy suits barely acknowledged him, except for the few who did, and those were worse because their eyes carried the heavy question they didn't bother hiding. Who let him in? He adjusted the strap of his laptop bag, forcing himself to stay composed. He had rehearsed this presentation for days. He knew every number, every trend, every risk model. He knew the client's past 5 acquisitions better than some of the executives who had worked here for a decade. This moment was supposed to be his chance. His first major pitch, his first time standing at the front of the room instead of against the wall. But then he heard it. A scoff, a dismissive laugh, and Arthur Hale's voice cutting through the room like a blade. "Oh, great," Arthur said loudly, waving a hand at him. "The intern's here early. Good. Someone needs to clear the dirty cups outside. They're starting to stink." A few executives chuckled, not because the joke was funny, but because laughing at the senior VP's jokes was safer than silence. Someone mumbled, "He's right," under their breath. Someone else smirked over their file. Michael froze for half a second, the words landing heavy. "Intern, clear the cups." He wasn't the intern. He wasn't here to serve anyone. He was here to present the most important analysis of the quarter. But none of that mattered when the room had already decided their version of who he was. He opened his mouth to respond, but the CEO had already walked in, adjusting his gold cufflinks, completely uninterested in the exchange. No one corrected Arthur. No one defended him. In this room, silence meant agreement. Arthur wasn't finished. He looked at Michael like a stain on the marble. "Come on, don't just stand there. Move. This is a $10 million pitch, not a cafeteria. Grab the cups." Laughter again, this time sharper, crueler. Michael felt a tightness in his chest. Not anger, not shock. Just a painfully familiar disappointment. The kind that tasted like metal on his tongue. The kind he learned to swallow from childhood. He took a slow breath, letting it steady him. His mother used to tell him, "People can strip you of opportunity, but don't let them strip you of composure." So he stood there, not moving, not shrinking, just existing with dignity in a room determined to take it from him. Have you ever been in a place so polished, so expensive, so proud of itself, and still felt like the dirtiest thing in it was how people looked at you? No one tells you that humiliation has a temperature. It burns at first, hot, unbearable. But then it cools into something cold and sharp, something that hardens around your ribs until you learn how to breathe around it. 2 floors down, the marble lobby glistened with gold inlays and orchids imported weekly. The air smelled like eucalyptus and wealth. Guests who walked through the revolving doors felt powerful because the building was designed to make them feel that way. It was a monument to money. But on the top floor, the power wasn't in the decor. It was in the way people carried themselves. The way titles made some men taller. The way silence from the wrong person could be career-killing. The boardroom wasn't just a meeting space. It was an ecosystem built on hierarchy, ego, and the comfort of those who had never felt uncomfortable a day in their lives. Arthur Hale was their king. His salt and steel hair was combed back with surgical precision. His watch gleamed with the quiet smugness of a man who wore $40,000 on his wrist, just to check the time for meetings he showed up late to. His voice carried the smooth, confident disrespect of someone who had always been told he was right, even when he wasn't. He sat with his legs spread wide, elbows resting on the chair like a throne, his laugh echoing through the room in waves. He didn't need to say he thought Michael didn't belong. It was written in the way he lifted his chin, in the way his eyes slid right past him, as if looking directly at him would be a waste of effort. Standing 3 feet away from him, Michael felt small, but not because he believed Arthur's version of him. No, it was because he had spent his entire life fighting versions of him, versions of people like Arthur who judged before listening, dismissed before knowing, minimized before seeing. Michael had learned to dress carefully. A modest charcoal suit, a navy tie, polished shoes. Clothes that said professional without attracting scrutiny. Clothes that wouldn't give anyone ammunition. The sleeves were slightly worn, but he made sure the fabric was clean, ironed, crisp. Presentation mattered, even when no one gave him credit. He always walked into rooms quietly, with measured steps. He spoke softly, respectfully. Not because he lacked confidence, but because louder black men were often labeled aggressive, and quiet black men were often ignored. He chose the latter. It hurt less. People thought they knew him. People thought they understood him. People assumed silence meant emptiness. They had no idea what lived beneath that calm surface. Michael came from a place where rent was a monthly negotiation with fear. A neighborhood where sirens were lullabies and opportunity was something you had to steal time for. He studied on cracked library tables, the air thick with humidity and ambition. He worked part-time jobs to help his mother keep the lights on. When his father died unexpectedly, Michael skipped his scholarship recognition ceremony to arrange the funeral. He grew up learning that responsibility wasn't a choice. It was survival. He carried those memories with him into every room. They were the reasons he worked twice as hard to get half as far. What nobody in that boardroom knew was that he had spent the last month identifying and fixing every single flaw in the pitch. He had stayed up night after night, hunched over spreadsheets, rerunning forecasting models, rewriting risk assessments. He had discovered that the senior team had used outdated data, leading to a 12% miscalculation that would have cost the company not just money, but credibility. He didn't tell anyone. He just fixed it. Because when you grow up with nothing, you don't wait for permission to add value. Then the glitch happened. Right as the CEO said, "Let's begin," the screen froze. The entire deck corrupted. The slides vanished. Error messages popped up like flashing warnings. The room dissolved into chaos. "What the hell is happening?" the CEO snapped. Arthur muttered a curse and jabbed angrily at the laptop, his composure evaporating. "The intern must have touched it. I told you not to let him near anything important." Michael felt the room tilt. Not literally, but socially, the atmosphere bending toward blame before truth. He opened his mouth to clarify, but Arthur's voice drowned him out. "Get out of the way." Executives exchanged panicked looks. Someone called IT. Someone else whispered anxiously to the CFO. The client representative, Ms. Navarro, watched everything with sharp, observant eyes. She had said nothing yet, but her expression said enough. This was amateur hour. "Does anyone have a backup?" she asked coolly. No one responded. Not a single leader had prepared one. Michael inhaled a quiet breath and stepped forward. For the first time that afternoon, people actually looked at him. "I do," he said. The room stilled. He removed a USB drive from his bag. "I rebuilt the deck from scratch and corrected the forecasts. The original data was inaccurate." His tone wasn't boastful. It was factual, steady, calm, a storm gathering order. He plugged it in. The screen lit up instantly, displaying crisp, color-balanced slides, high-resolution charts, perfectly formatted projections. The executives blinked at the screen like it was magic. Then Michael presented. He didn't just deliver numbers, he delivered clarity. He explained market volatility with metaphors that made sense. He broke down risk assessments with the precision of a surgeon. He tied financial trends to global events like a historian. And when he reached the segment on international expansion, he switched seamlessly into Spanish, addressing Ms. Navarro directly. The room fell silent, not out of politeness, but out of awe. The kind of awe that comes from misjudging someone so badly you feel it in your bones. When he finished, no one moved. No one spoke. No one breathed. Miss Navarro leaned back, hands folded. "This is the most compelling, accurate, and well-structured presentation I've seen from your firm." She turned to the CEO. "I want him leading our account." The CEO blinked rapidly, scrambling to process. Arthur's jaw fell open, his face draining of color. "Him?" Arthur sputtered. "He's not—" But Ms. Navarro cut him off sharply. "He's the only one here who is prepared." The CEO straightened his tie, suddenly polite. "Michael, how would you feel about stepping into a senior role?" Michael's answer was simple. "I'd be honored." And for the first time since he walked into the room, every eye in the room looked at him with something new. Respect. And something else, too. Regret. Arthur's expression cracked, not just with shock, but with something uglier. Something that had been hiding beneath every smirk, every dismissive comment, every condescending instruction. The realization that the man he tried to shrink had just expanded beyond his reach. The energy around the table shifted sharply. Executives who once pretended not to hear Arthur's insults now avoided his eyes. Some cleared their throats, some shuffled their papers. A few even looked at Michael with the uncomfortable guilt of people slowly recognizing their own bias. Arthur wasn't ready to lose control. Men like him never were. He leaned forward, voice trembling with forced authority. "This is absurd. He's not even senior. He doesn't have the experience." Ms. Navarro cut in again, more sharply this time. "Experience?" She tapped her finger against the table. "Experience isn't the same as competence, Mr. Hale. Experience doesn't excuse carelessness. It doesn't excuse sloppiness. And it certainly doesn't excuse arrogance." A few executives flinched. Arthur swallowed hard. She turned back to Michael. "What you provided today wasn't just a presentation. It was a solution. It was foresight. You caught mistakes no one else in this room even noticed." Her eyes swept the table. "If anything, you should all be thanking him." Silence washed over the room. Thick, heavy, humiliating. Then, unexpectedly, the CEO cleared his throat and said, "She's right." He looked at Michael the way a man looks at something he had overlooked for far too long. "We should have recognized your talent sooner." Arthur opened his mouth, but nothing came out. For the first time in a long time, he had no power. The room wasn't listening to him anymore. The authority he clung to like a shield fell apart in his hands. Michael didn't gloat, didn't smirk, didn't revel. He simply sat with the dignity he arrived with, which somehow now took up more space than it ever had before. The CEO stood. "We'll need to restructure the team around this account. Michael, we'll be putting you in charge of overseeing the strategy moving forward." A wave of approval spread across the room. Small nods, murmurs of agreement, thin smiles aimed at him like offerings of peace. Arthur could only stare. For years he had weaponized doubt, but doubt was powerless now. The evidence was on the screen. The respect was in the room. The truth was undeniable. Still, his pride clawed for one last grip. This is a mistake, Arthur stammered. He doesn't know how things work here. He doesn't understand. Michael finally spoke, his voice calm and precise. I understand more than you think. Arthur flinched as if struck. Michael continued. I understand that being prepared matters more than being loud. That competence isn't about position, it's about responsibility. And I understand that some people mistake entitlement for leadership. His gaze met Arthur's, a clean, unbroken line of truth. But I don't. The silence that followed wasn't awkward. It was cleansing. Arthur looked around the room for an ally, for even one person willing to support him. But chairs turned away. Eyes avoided him. People shuffled papers. The room he once dominated now treated him like a liability, because in a moment of crisis, the man he mocked became the man who saved them. And the man who mocked him became the man who embarrassed the company. The hierarchy inverted. Ms. Navarro stood, extending her hand to Michael. Your insight is remarkable. I look forward to working with you. He shook her hand, firm, steady, not eager, not meek, just equal. Thank you, he said. The meeting wrapped quickly after that. Executives drifted out in small groups, whispering among themselves, careful to avoid Arthur. A few stopped to congratulate Michael. Others offered their business cards, their smiles, their sudden respect. He accepted each with grace, but he didn't forget how they had looked at him before he revealed his talent. People didn't change. Situations did. And now the situation belonged to him. When the last of the executives left, the boardroom fell quiet again, just like at the start of the meeting. But the silence felt different now, lighter somehow. Arthur remained seated, staring rigidly at the table, his jaw tight. He looked smaller, not because Michael had made him small, but because the truth finally showed his real size. Michael gathered his laptop, sliding it into his bag with careful movements. Arthur didn't look up. For a moment, Michael considered just walking out, ending it there. But then something in him shifted. Not anger, not revenge, but clarity. He turned back toward Arthur. You know, Michael said softly, you didn't have to make it this hard. Arthur blinked, surprised to be addressed. Michael's voice stayed calm, gentle even. You could have asked for help. You could have treated me like a colleague. You could have done the job instead of assuming no one would notice your shortcuts. Arthur's shoulders tensed. Michael didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. The truth carried its own power. But you didn't, and now everyone sees it. Arthur finally looked up, eyes filled with something between anger and fear. Are you going to report me? Michael shook his head. No, I don't need to. He paused, then added, your actions spoke for themselves today. Arthur's jaw clenched. His gaze dropped again. Shame replaced arrogance. Michael turned and walked out. Not victorious, not vindictive. Simply free. The hallway outside the boardroom was warm with afternoon sunlight. The windows glowed gold. People passed with papers and coffees, unaware that one floor away, an entire hierarchy had just shifted. Michael walked slowly, each step feeling more grounded, more stable. Not because the company suddenly valued him, not because he earned a new title, but because he had proven something to himself. For so long, he felt the world pushing him to shrink, to fit into the small spaces others assigned him, to apologize for his own brilliance, to make his success comfortable for people who feared it. But today, he didn't shrink. Today, the room expanded around him. When he reached the elevator, his reflection stared back from the polished doors, still quiet, still composed, still humble. But something had changed. He stood taller, more rooted, more certain. The elevator chimed softly. The doors opened. As he stepped inside, he let the entire day settle in his chest. The humiliation, the silence, the courage, the clarity. People assumed the black man would fail. They assumed he was the intern. They assumed he was unprepared. They assumed he was small. But assumptions are paper walls. Thin, fragile, easily torn once truth walks through them. People think prejudice shouts. But the worst kind? It whispers. It smiles. It dismisses. And it underestimates. But underestimation is a dangerous thing, because it creates the perfect conditions for brilliance to bloom unnoticed, until the moment it's undeniable. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't fight for the spotlight. He didn't demand recognition. He simply delivered excellence when it mattered. That was enough. It was more than enough. It was everything. As the elevator doors closed, Michael whispered, not out of pride, but out of relief, "I belong here." And the truth was, he always had. The world just needed to catch up. Greatness doesn't always roar. Sometimes it enters quietly, waits patiently, and rises exactly when doubt is loudest. They believed the black man would fail, until he delivered the final presentation, until he rewrote the narrative, until he turned humiliation into power, until he revealed who he had always been. Brilliant, prepared, unshakable, and impossible to ignore from this day forward.